Staff of hostels all around the world, what is the weirdest shit you've ever seen happening amongst backpackers? I've never worked in a hostel, but I've stayed in loads. I always remember this one guy in Warsaw. It was quite a big hostel, but despite it being summer, quite empty. So I was in a room of 8 beds and it was me, this guy and a couple. On the first day I walked in the room to find him grappling the ceiling as if he was Spider-Man. I didn't notice him at first, but then he thudded to the ground and acted as if nothing had happened. He repeated this trick a few times and I saw him walking around the hostel as if he was a kid trying not to touch the floor, clambering on stuff and the walls, etc. When I woke up the next day, he was outside in the courtyard doing a cross between martial arts and some kind of yoga wearing a toga. When I got back that night, he was singing on Skype. I also noticed he was reading a book purely about squirrels. I was there for 3 nights and I think he spent his whole time in the hostel doing crackpot things. Worked in a party hostel in the middle of Melbourne for a couple of years. I've seen some it. Man, our hostel had 3 bars in the building, one of which was open 24/7. Happy to elaborate, but in short I've seen the following. A gorgeous Swedish girl in nothing but a G-string stroll into reception and ask for another key for her room. A Scottish guy on ecstasy run a half marathon. An off-duty army guy drop trow, sit on a futon and proceed to it on the futon and piss all over himself. An otherwise quiet and reserved Korean girl getting fisted in the middle of a bar. A 40-something divorced mother of 3 in the middle of a 6-guy sandwich. Multiple porn stylistic scenes in full dorm rooms. And a lot of other it I can't remember. It was a crazy couple of years and even now I look back and think, wow, did that it really happen? Edit. This has been fun. And evidently quite the calmer mine. But I really have to go to bed. Feel free to ask any questions you have and I will answer tomorrow. I was in Prague a few years ago, staying at a hostel, as high schoolers are wont to do. Me and my buddy had just gotten back from a night of drinking, poor decisions, etc. And were chillin' in the lobby area when this Swedish metal band that was also staying at the hostel comes back. All of them absolutely at-faced. The vocalist, who's this huge dude with long blonde hair, exactly what you'd expect from a Swedish metal band, is completely plastered and starts yelling, asking people to kick him in the head. Nobody really wants to do it, but he was being really aggressive and eventually he puts his head down on this table and one of the other dudes in the band, I think the bassist, starts kicking him in the head, as requested, like hard ducking kicks, right in the skull. After each kick, the dude yells to do it again. After 3 or 4 kicks, the bassist stops cause his foot hurts too much, and they all go upstairs and pass out. I saw them all the next day and the vocalist was completely fine, with no ill effects other than being hungover. The bassist, however, broke his ducking foot on this dude's hard ass head, and had to go to the hospital. TL. Dr. Swedish metal band at a hostel in Prague engage in some drunken masochistic behavior. Hilarity ensues. Edit. Okay. My friend thinks the band was called something like Ver Cochlin. At a hostel in Vietnam, I saw a drunk Danish guy slip off a table on a stray ping pong ball, dislocate his shoulder and piss himself at breakfast. Superb viewing. I was working the night shift and basically everything was quiet. All of a sudden this weird little guy comes to the reception and tells me he needs 2 new mattresses. Why? Because he wet his bed. To be honest, it happens more often than you might think in hostels. I say no problem and ask him why he needs a second one. He goes Then another guy comes down the stairs looking pissed. And he actually was. He was in the bottom bunk. He woke because of the pee dripping on his face. I was the new guy at the time, so I got stuck cleaning the bathrooms. Upon entering the men's room to do my rounds, I hear a man having what sounds like the most painful it of his life. I carry on and go about my work for the next 15 minutes and he still isn't out yet. Right as I'm about to ask him if he's alright, this big jolly Brit walks out of the stall with a handful of condoms filled with mystery drugs. He looks me dead in the eye, says Singapore, mate, and walks out solemnly shaking his head. At a hostel in Amsterdam, an Australian guy named Steve-O, incredibly drunk, BTW, threw himself face first down the stairs. At the bottom he got up and yelled up to us, "Now that's how you go down the stairs." I used to manage a hostel in Mission Beach, Australia for 4 years. I saw a couple have sex in a hammock while standing up. One guy took a dump in a small garbage bin in a 10-bedroom while everyone was in there on Christmas, he was drunk. I love that these stories are 80% by Australians or about Australians. Go to sleep, you bastards. It's nearly midnight on Sunday. A few years back I stayed in a backpackers in Vienna, Austria for a few nights. On the last night I had a new bunkmate, and she seemed like a lovely girl. So I go out, get blackout drunk and awake at 5 AM in my top bunk to the unmistakable sound of shower 6. A few minutes later the girl brought her friend out and hopped into the bed under me. Several come inside me and your D's huge S ensue as I am violently bounced around on the top bunk feeling sicker by the minute. My bunkmate then calls out another man's name and is soon joined by a second young buck and the party below me becomes a threesome. This continues for another 20 minutes while I am bounced around the loose bunk some more. Eventually they finish up and the guys leave, giving me the chance to escape to the bathroom and spew. When I return the girl says to me casually, "Don't suppose you want a ride too," or something to that effect. I politely decline and proceed to return to the bathroom and fall asleep in the shower. TL. Dr. Chick in bed below me rides the tricycle as I awkwardly ponder my escape. I used to process the comment cards for the National Office of American Youth Hostels in Washington, D.C. Part of my job was passing on the info if they got any comments that needed to be investigated. We had multiple cards from one hostel that said things like, "All of the staff here are on too many drugs to function. It's totally filthy and there are rats." This hostel was in Florida. I never found out what happened. I manage a hostel in America and nothing surprises me anymore. I have seen people walking around the halls naked, people falling downstairs drunk, the usual stuff, yeah, no. But there was one French guest, he was sober as he had just checked in. I get a call from the business below the hostel saying someone is pissing out the window. I run up, catch the guy, and he honestly thought it would be alright to do that. He swore tat in France that's what they do. Needless to say we kicked him out. I was working on Crete in a youth hostel and cut my own hair using a couple of mirrors. An Albanian friend liked it and paid me to cut his hair. Him being too afraid of being deported to go into the village to get a haircut. So I cut his hair. I made it look just like Roger Moore in Live and Let Die, and his friends got interested. I cut 28 men's hair. Almost all of the migrant Albanians wore old 1970s clothes. Like Albania stopped importing old clothes after 1978. So the haircuts were twerking their fly collars and no belt golf pants. Whilst staying in a hostel in Australia, we ran bus shuttle from the hostel to the town centre. One night we get on the bus. The driver starts it up and proceeds to drive like Keanu Reeves in Speed, bombing down the road in the opposite direction to our destination. After 5 minutes of fearing for our lives we ask him what's going on. The guy stops the bus and at this point informs us that he is in fact not our driver. He was just some random drunk guy that fancied a joyride. Traveler's story, not a hostel employee. A few years back traveling through Europe I met up with a bunch of Paris locals on Christmas Eve in the bar of my hostel. Long story short, I end up having incredibly drunken porno sex with a French girl on the floor in the middle of a 6-bunk room, totally occupied by Taiwanese and Indian students. I vaguely recall looking up and seeing all 5 other bunks with the sheets pulled up over their faces. Cut to a month later. I've done a lap of France and have one night booked in the same Paris hostel before I head off to Asia. I approach the hostel staff that I had befriended, offering cheese I had bought in Marseille. One guy said, "You're the one we had complaints about." Confused, I ask what they mean. He said on Christmas Day, all the Taiwanese students and Indian students complained that someone was doing a porn video in the middle of their hotel room. They also said they knew when it stopped because you climbed into bed and started snoring. We laughed a lot and they gave me free beer because they got lots of hits on their website. A friend of mine worked the front desk at a hostel to pay for his room when he was in Australia, and by all metrics, he was good at his job, but they had to fire him when they found out he was selling acid over the counter. Don't work at a hostel, but alas my friend and I experienced this while staying at one. NSFW. So my friend and I traveled to Copenhagen in 2009 so see a concert. Metallica if you're wondering, and stayed at a hostel in downtown Copenhagen. So anyway, we're out partying late and get pretty drunk. The morning after we wake up hungover as hell. My friend is a bit quicker out of the bed than me, and he proceeds to the common showers changing room. When he gets to the door to the changing room he opens it, and standing there is a pale fat man, 30-year-old, completely naked in front of the mirror with one hand on his hip and the other one jerking furiously. My friend saying he has never thought one could spank the monkey that hard without breaking it. Note, this is about 10 to 11 AM. So he was clearly into risky playing of the old skin flute. My friend then just stares at him for a few seconds because of slow reactions due to hangover, laughs, then walks away. As my friend is walking away from the changing rooms he hears the guy saying sorry in a really shameful voice. Later on that evening my friend sees Mr. Wank sitting with his friends having some beers and laughing. Until he sees my friend staring at him and smiling the "I know what you did this morning you dirty dog" smile. Mr. then proceeds to stop laughing, looks down and says nothing for the remainder of the time we sit near them. Poor bastard. TLDR. My friend walked in on a guy wanking furiously in front of a mirror in the common changing rooms midday. I once stayed in a hostel in Sydney, Australia. It had fresh, blood-stained bullet holes in the wall. Not hostel staff, but lived in a big hostel in central London when at university. Had a lot of fun in there and saw the weirdest things the time I was living there. By far the strangest of all is related to this girl who was very introverted and lonely. Didn't really talk to anybody in there and had the weirdest behavior. One day, there was a commotion in one of the floors because she was all covered in blood and weak, walking like a zombie along the hallways, near the toilets and shower rooms. To make a long story short, she had just gave birth to a baby in one of the shower rooms and nervously kept telling everyone that the baby wasn't hers. In come the police, as in other occasions, and social services, and that was the last we saw of her. I've stars in hostels lots over the past 6 or so years and among many this was simple but my fav. In a 10-bed dorm in Coogee Beach, Sydney, all guys we went out together, got drunk and stumbled back and got into bed. We all chatted it for a bit then people stated to drift off. Some guy had met a girl at the bar and arrived later with her. They thought they were quiet but I was sure they were being so loud everyone was woken up too. Either way I tried to ignore it while they had quick loud and noisy bottom bunk Hostel 6. Once they were done the room was silent. I still wasn't sure if anyone else had been woken up by them. Till one of the guys, a Scouser, simply said out loud to break the silence, "Can I have a go next?" The poor girl ran out. Everyone was awake and a good hour of loin ensued. Hostel are great. You def see the worst and best in people. No particular stories but it's a good time. I used to be a bartender at a hostel. When I wanted to close bar I'd take everyone skinny dipping on the beach. We used to have a competition to see who could have a six in as many different places as possible. I used to work and drink 16 hours a day. I had a famous musician ask me to go dance naked on the beach with her. There was a full-on whole bar suddenly erupts in a fight like in a Wild West movie scene. It was 4 months of my life for no pay and I doubt I could have done it much longer. It was a good experience though. I'm opening a hostel in 10 days and a lot of these stories are the it I'm worried about. Come on Reddit. OP wants to hear backpacker 6 stories. Till hostel workers have it rough in Australia. This thread has taught me to always get the top bunk equals. I worked at a party hostel in Budapest. In my time there the card game at head became very popular, and eventually people raised the stakes of the game. A stake would be decided at the beginning of the game, i.e. loser has a shot of the winner's urine, and whoever decided to play committed to suffering if they lose. Initially the stakes were relatively tolerable. Loser gets a piercing in a place of the winner's choice. Loser shaves off an eyebrow. Loser gets winner's initials tattooed on their bum etc. In my time observing, I was never game to play. I witnessed a guy, the winner, vomiting on the loser's head. The same guy lost the following 2 days and had to lick the winner's bum and snort the winner's semen out of a shot glass. The same guy won for both those games. It didn't seem so ducked up at the time but in hindsight it was a very strange way for young travelers to be spending their days. I was working for accommodation in a hostel in Australia. This strange family stayed for a few nights. Really fat woman, and nice, but clearly crazy Kiwi guy. He showed us cuts on his arms, legs and torso that he had given himself so that in a fight, if someone pulls a knife, I won't panic or react. Anyway, on their second night, they all get very drunk and have a huge argument. We hear a smash and head through to the lounge. The woman has smashed a table and chairs and is now semi-consciously pissing herself on the floor. So a few of our female friends who are staying in the same dorm as her wake her and try get her to bed. But wait, there's more. The next morning, the girls tell us how the woman was up all night talking. It turns out that the argument had been with the Kiwi guy, who was her nephew, and also her lover. TLDR, fat woman pisses herself after a fight with her nephew lover. I lived in a backpackers hostel in East London for 4 months. It was actually really uneventful. No bullet holes, rampant traveler sics or inconvenient kidnappings. I feel as though I missed out now. So a friend of mine pissed himself on the top bunk in a hostel in Melbourne. The pee then managed to flow through the thin mattress to a couple having sex below. He woke up to an angry Irish man yelling at him. He told him you can't put the toothpaste back in the tube, rolled over and went back to bed. He was forced to steam clean the mattress in full view of everyone the following day. The pee was later described as coming down with the force of a waterfall. Australians are ducking lunatics. I was staying in a hostel in southern Brazil, opened the wrong door, and was confronted with 4 or 5 hooting and hollering Australians, butt naked, shoving sugar into each other's buttholes. During their tenure there was an excess of public nudity, pissing in each other's mouths, roughhousing, and the guys did some things with a few of the girls there at the same time, which I'm not sure I want to know the full story about. Pretty funny, cool guys to hang out with though. Not a hostel worker, but happened to me one night. So it's just me and this American girl in a hostel room. This English couple check in one night and go out to get drunk. I too go out to get drunk with other friends. I get wasted and arrive back at the hostel room at 3 AM. The American girl is asleep. The English couple nowhere to be found. I wake up at 4 AM. My bed is shaking. I'm thinking, earthquake. I look below my bunk and the English girl has her legs in the air and is getting banged by some guy. I then look to my side and what I thought was her boyfriend is banging some other girl at the same time. Okay JPEG. Go back to sleep, because I can't be bothered to say anything and I'm tired. I see the American girl, she was very young, in our kitchen the next day and she's eating cornflakes, visibly shaking and crying. Haha. TLDR. English couple had swinger sex all night in our room and mentally scarred an American girl for life. As someone who is currently staying at a hostel in Australia, I really shouldn't be reading this thread. Staying in a hostel in London that had a hot tub under the roof. Middle of the night we hear what sounds like rain. Being from Oregon, I assume it is exactly that. Until the lights turn on and everyone is swearing and freaking out. There's a solid stream of water coming down the doorway and wall. Turns out someone turned a hose on to fill the hot tub and proceeded to pass out, allowing the water to flood through the building and our room. Got a free pint out of it though. Not staff, but a hostel attendee. In Prague, we stayed in a hostel with a bar that liked to serve absinthe and Red Bull shots. Think jajabums. One guy who we called Bluto, like Animal House, decided he'd go for the record of most A-bombs in one night. Something like 16. I'm fairly sure he made up this record. We all went to bed on the 3rd floor and figured the night was over. I woke up later from a dream of someone screaming, which turned out to be real. The lights were on and the whole dorm was awake thanks to A-bomb guy lying on the ground with blood pouring from his head going giant. He fell from the top bunk. They heard him in reception on the bottom floor. Somehow I slid through it. He also pissed the bed and in the hallway, and spent the rest of the night screaming at his brother. It's sad that about 80% of these stories involve Australia some way or another. Yet as an Australian myself, I'm ashamed to say that I'm not even surprised. I have only stayed in a hostel twice, both with my ex-girlfriend. The first time was in Dublin after a night at the bars. We were sharing a room with a female friend, 3 other American men from Yale that we didn't know. We turn in around midnight, knowing that we have a long day tomorrow. A couple hours later, In comes two of the three. They climb into bed, clumsily, and turn out the lights. 10 minutes later, the third walks in and doesn't turn on the light. There's a girl with him, and they're both blind drunk. They stumble to bed and get undressed. While he's trying to flick start this girl, we're all awake, chuckling, and the girl says something aloud in an Irish accent about where she wants it. She's using lots of slang and Gaelic sounding words that would probably make me ma blush. 10 minutes later still, and they're going at it hard. Everyone is still awake and laughing. Finally, as our American ambassador is about to reach climax, one of his buddies turns on the light and we all have a good laugh at the show. After the laughter subsides, the pale-skinned, red-headed bird says softly to the guy in a dulcet Irish tone, "I've got something to tell ya." Pause. AHM actually from West Virginia. Edit. Goddammit swipe. Changing words on me.